All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let that get set up. Come on, hurry up. Good. No, close the window. I don't want to hear myself talk. Okay, good. All right, so before we get started, I just wanted to say a couple of things because this is our last day of in-person classes. I know that that doesn't feel the same for those of you that are Zooming in today. So here's kind of the deal. I've had a lot of opportunity to learn this semester about what's working and what's not working. So I know that quite a few of you are going to be taking classes with me next semester. I've got people coming to biopsych, sensation and perception. And here's kind of the deal. I don't think I'm going to do the split thing next semester. So if you are going to take biopsych or sensation and perception, you are going to see me every Monday, every Wednesday, and every Friday. I feel like this, when I made this decision, I didn't know what it was going to look like at this point. My expectations have been exceeded, and that's partially due to all of the work that y'all have done. Dr. Weitzel sent out a Thanksgiving message, basically really appreciating the hard work that you have done this semester. And I have to agree with her sentiments. I know it's been hard, and I know it's really frustrating. I will kind of say, I think if we can get through this winter, I think things will be a lot better. We have an end in sight. As of today, we've got 3 vaccines, 3 with really good efficacy. And so I'm pretty hopeful. I hope that you are too, but now is not the time to let up. Now is the time to dig deep. So I would say, especially over the winter holidays, if you're finding yourself stressed out, especially as we get closer to finals, self-care strategies are really critical. And I would also say check in with me. I know that when I start going asynchronous, I'm going to start filming videos and you're going to have to watch them at your pace. If you're having trouble, if you have questions, that is the time to check in with me. I've got Discord on my phone. I will be on Discord for office hours. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind. So thank you for everything. I've had a great semester teaching you. I hope you've had a good semester learning from me. We're not done yet. We still got some more stuff to cover, but thank you for making this a great semester. And I can't wait to see you next semester. And for those of you that are going to have classes with me, I can't wait for you to learn a little bit more from me and a little bit less on Zoom. All right. Because I like Zoom, but I got to tell you, the Zoom fatigue is real. It is very, very real. And I can't wait until the day where we don't have to do it. But until then, let's keep digging deep and let's work together. And let's have some hope. Okay. So last time we were here, we were talking about social psychology, and we ain't done yet. We were talking about the theory of cognitive dissonance. And in particular, I mentioned that something you might want to check out is what is called when prophecy fails. So basically, when people make these predictions, what happens when the predictions don't come true? And so we tend to find that people double down because it's easier to do that than to say, I've been had by a false prophecy. It's a lot harder for us to admit that. So today, I think you're going to like what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about how we are influenced by each other. Okay. Oh, people are still trickling on it. Good, good, good. So how are we influenced by each other? So now we're going to move on. So we've talked about attitudes. We've talked about attributions, explaining other people's behavior. And now we're going to talk about social influence. So the influence that we have over each other. So we're going to talk about how attitudes, ideas, and beliefs are molded by outside influences. And nowhere do I kind of see this, and I'm going to be a kind of a grumpy old person a little bit. So over the weekend, I got Christmas lists from my nieces. 2 of them are teenagers. One of them's about to be 15, right before Christmas, and the other one just turned 13. And so the 15-year-old basically made a Christmas list, like a slideshow with memes on every page. And I'm like, I don't get these memes. There's like one with a frog on a skateboard and it says, I'm skating away from my problems. And I'm just like, that's bleak. I'm like, what kind of memes did I have in the 90s when I was 15? But what was really interesting is she picked all of these clothes from like Shein. I'm like, don't go to Shein. Don't go to Shein. They have a really bad habit of ripping off designers, but odds are pretty good. She picked a lot of clothes from Shein because that's where a lot of her friends get clothes. And it's kind of where a lot of people her age might get clothes for super cheap. So how did she get this idea? So here's kind of a joke kind of related to this, and this is kind of a grumpy old man joke. So it's a comic called Non Sequitur. Banking on the youth market, tattoo and piercing. Be like all your friends and express your individuality. So we're like, I'm going to do this so it can make me feel like an individual, but then you end up being just like everybody else. And I don't know how I feel about that. I'm like, that's kind of a cranky joke, but there you go. Okay, so here's kind of a very, very interesting idea. How many of you have had this happen where, this happens a lot less now, but even on Zoom, I can kind of see it where if I'm in a meeting and I've got my hand like this, I can immediately look around in a meeting and see somebody else or maybe several people who basically are all imitating each other's movements. Or if you've ever gone and taken a drink of something, and then you notice that somebody else immediately takes a drink right after you, or sometimes you're drinking at the same time. Or this is something I noticed quite a bit. Somebody will cough or clear their throat, and then almost immediately other people in the class will start to cough and clear their throat. So in these particular instances, it almost seems like we have this weird programming to mirror and imitate other people. So I would kind of encourage you the next time that you're in your suite, or if you're at home with your family, look and see how often you are imitating each other's movements without even consciously realizing it. This is what's known as the chameleon effect. When we see somebody doing something, we have a tendency to want to imitate it. So there's a pretty famous study that actually looks at the chameleon effect. So a participant was put into a room with a Confederate. And just a reminder, a Confederate is an actor that is basically in cahoots with the experimenter. So the Confederate would either rub their face or shake their foot. And here's what's really interesting. Participants were far more likely to rub their face if the Confederate rubbed their face, and they were considerably more likely to shake their foot if the Confederate shook their foot. So whatever the Confederate did, the participant had a tendency to imitate. We also kind of see this with contagious yawning. So if somebody around you yawns, odds are pretty good you might yawn too. My partner and I can really set each other off right before bed. Like last night when we were talking, I yawned and then he did. So this is kind of the chameleon effect in action. We are herd creatures. We really are. How many of you have heard about toilet paper shortages again? Now, let's be clear. There's not a problem with the supply chain. At least here in Missouri, we're not going into lockdown, at least not right now. So what's driving this? Probably what's driving this is that you see that toilet paper is running low. And so you're like, oh, I got to get some next time. And so the next time that you're there, You will probably get some, even if you don't need it, just because there's this idea that everybody else is getting it, and that means that I need to get it too. That need to imitate, that herd mentality, is a big deal. Let me see. Somebody is having trouble getting in. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit, when we talk about social influence in psychology, we tend to talk about two different things. We talk about what's called conformity, and we talk about obedience. So you can kind of think of conformity and obedience as existing on a continuum of social influence. We're also going to talk very, very soon about something that kind of exists in the middle of these two extremes, known as compliance, doing what somebody asks you to. So conformity is adjusting behavior and your thinking to fit with a particular group standard. Now, here's what's really critical. You don't necessarily have to believe it. Obedience is behaving a certain way because an authority figure tells you to. Now, conformity, you can potentially adjust your thinking. With obedience, again, you do not necessarily have to believe it. All right, everybody good? Okay. So many of us conform. Just think about some of the different social norms that we tend to engage in. And by the way, I know that somebody actually picked as their infographic following social norms. They had a big pointy finger. What norms are you following? So I thought that was really good. I should have those graded later this afternoon. So norms, when you think about the word norm, think about the word should. This is what you should do. So norms are rules that are either implicit or explicit about how we are expected to behave. So that includes things like not standing too close, and good Lord, y'all, don't stand too close is probably something we are going to be enforcing for a couple more years. I already didn't like it when people stood too close to me, and now this is just like, this is my bubble. Don't get in my bubble. I don't like it. Don't get in my bubble. Also, other norms like waiting your turn. Can anybody think of some other norms that we might have right now? Not specifically related to the pandemic, just to be clear, it can be any kind of norm. What are some other norms that we have? I would say washing your hands, but if nothing else, this pandemic has taught us that a lot of us are kind of gross. Like, you didn't know about the 20-second rule? I learned about that when I was a grocery bagger. Plus, I like hand sanitizer, although my hands don't like it. I got a new batch of hand cream coming today. I'm very excited. And that's how I know I'm old. I get excited about hand cream. All right, anybody got any norms? How about here in class? Y'all know of any norms? What are some other norms? Cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze. Do the dab. Do the dab or the Dracula cough. What's another one? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah? Don't talk with your mouth full. Yeah, that's a norm I violate all the time. Holding a door open for other people. Yeah, that'd be a pretty good norm. That is a very culturally specific one. I've kind of noticed that in a lot of Southern cultures, I am more likely to see men holding doors open for women. I don't necessarily notice that as much in other places, but I have noticed here in Missouri, I see it a lot. That could be another one. Handshakes when you meet somebody, I have a feeling that's probably going to change. I am personally a big fan of jazz hands instead. Okay, so one of the things that we kind of know about norms too is that it can be really weird when you violate a norm. It's going to feel weird. How many of you have had this happen where you're at a concert or you're at some kind of event and suddenly a standing ovation breaks out? And all of a sudden, everybody is standing up and you're kind of in this weird position because you're like, I don't know if this warrants a standing ovation, because occasionally that has happened to me where I'm like, I don't know if this warrants my standing and clapping, but everybody else is doing it and more people are starting to do it. So you have this idea, am I going to be like the one person who sits, or am I going to go along with the crowd, and am I going to stand up with people? Now, just to be clear, I am not necessarily a cranky person. I do stand for certain things, but occasionally there's a time where I might be like, yeah, I don't know if a standing ovation is warranted. It's like outstanding performance, and maybe I am cranky, I don't know. But all of a sudden you get this idea, you know, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, but everybody around you is, and you don't want to look awkward, you don't want to look uncomfortable, you don't want other people to judge you, so you end up giving in and giving this standing ovation. How many of that, has that happened to any of you before? Probably. Maybe not for a standing ovation, but maybe for something else where you're the only one doing something or not doing something, and it feels really weird to stick out. Nobody knows this better than the researcher Solomon Asch. So Solomon Asch actually did a really famous study on conformity. And this was actually a very basic study. So they were told, the participants were basically told, this was a study looking at cognition. We're going to have you judge line lengths. That's not that hard. So they would give you a standard line and you would be told, which of these does this line match? Does it match 1, 2, or 3? Pretty straightforward, right? Like it's 2. It's obvious that it's 2. So in a control group, you basically were judging line lengths on your own. That's not hard. It doesn't really change your behavior in any way. But in a special condition, so I want you to imagine this with me. I'd like you to imagine along with me here. So you're in this experiment and you're in a group with about 11 other people. So there's 12 people in the room and you are all being told to judge the line lengths. Okay, that's not bad. And you get a standard line and you get the comparison line, and it's obviously 2. But one by one, the experimenter starts asking the people in the group, what's the answer? And everybody around you is saying, oh, it's 3, which it is clearly incorrect. So one by one, everybody else in the group is saying, oh, it's 3, 3, 3, 3. And then finally, it's your turn. You have a decision to make. Are you going to go along with everybody else and give the clearly incorrect answer? Or are you going to stick to your guns? And are you going to say, everybody else is wrong, it's 2? So those other people in the experiment, in this critical conform condition, all of those 11 people are actors. They are being told to give the clearly incorrect answer. The only actual participant in this study is you. And here's what Asch found. In the conform condition, where everybody is giving a clearly incorrect answer, so they did this on 15 trot, on 11 out of 15 trials, the actors give the clearly incorrect response. So are you going to follow even if everyone else is objectively wrong? So ASCH basically found that in our conform condition, people stuck to their guns a slight majority of the time. About 63.2% of the responses were correct, but that also meant that about 36.8% of these conform trials, people conformed with the group and gave a clearly incorrect answer. Now, here's what's interesting though. So this would make us think that most people will conform on any given point, but that's not actually true. ASCH found that there are strong individual differences in people who conform versus people who do not. 25% of all participants never conformed on any of the trials. And that means that the remaining 75% conformed at least once on at least one trial. And even then, probably some conformed more than others. Okay, so why? Oh, so this is really kind of important. So why do we conform? People tend to conform for a couple of different reasons. So one of the obvious reasons why we choose to conform is that we want to gain approval and we want to avoid being rejected. Remember that as human beings, we have a very strong need to want to belong. And ostracism and alienation often will, at least in our evolutionary history, meant that you probably were not going to survive. So feeling like you are approved of and not rejected boosts your evolutionary chances of survival. And today, it makes you feel safer. We want approval from other people. It's very, very hard to stand out and be different from others. Most of us just want to be a little different. Like we want to be different enough that we're unique. We don't want to be so different that we're ostracized and rejected. Additionally, under other circumstances, so this is what's called our normative social influence. It's also possible that there is some informational influence. The group may have important information or connections that you are not necessarily going to get if you're not a part of the group. So for example, when I was in college, my father pushed me very, very hard to try to rush a sorority. I did. Guess how that went? It didn't really work out very well for me. But my father was like, you should do this because you'll develop connections. You'll be able to get a better job and stuff like that. And that could be seen as a potential source of informational social influence. You have access to things that you otherwise would not get. So here are a couple of things. So all of us are likely to conform under certain circumstances. So some of you, for example, have told me that when you go to Walmart, you occasionally see people shoot you looks because you're wearing a mask. I found that happen more in the beginning, and it happened less with elderly people. And I noticed that I was more likely to get dirty looks from people my own age. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. Like, I am definitely at the point where I'm like, this works for me. It may not work for you. I'm not judging you. So I'm just going to do my own thing. But here's what we know. There are certain factors that will make us more or less likely to conform. So first of all, if you feel really strongly about something, you're going to be less likely to conform. So for example, I kind of told you, for example, that I don't like smoking. I have a mother who smokes. I have a sister who smokes e-cigarettes, and I've kind of watched what smoking can kind of do to your body. My partner's father died of lung cancer, partially due to smoking. Of course, other factors are involved there. So I feel really strongly that smoking is not a good idea for me. So if somebody tries to offer me a cigarette, it's not going to be very hard for me to go, no, thanks, because I feel really strongly that I shouldn't be doing that. Now, if you have voiced your commitment to something, you are going to be less likely to conform as well. Your word is your bond. You have integrity. And one of the things that we find is that a lot of people don't want to go against their integrity. Like, your integrity should not be cheap. So what we tend to find is that people who have voiced their commitment to something are going to be less likely to go back on that. So for one example, and of course, this is me, this is obviously not something that you have to do. I don't eat animals. I haven't eaten animals for a year, and that's something that I care very much about. And so one of the things that I did for Thanksgiving, I took a pledge that said I would not eat a turkey, which I am not eating a turkey. I'm cooking a ham for somebody else, but I am not eating a turkey. I have a vegan roast, I'm good to go. But because I voiced my commitment and took a pledge that said, hey, I won't eat turkey, I am going to be more likely to follow through on that. It's part of the reason why, if you're trying to develop a new habit like exercise more, study better, things like that, one of the best things that you can do is voice that commitment to somebody else. Because first of all, by voicing it, you're less likely to go back on your word. And additionally, by telling somebody, they can hold you accountable. And then finally, you're less likely to conform if you don't see the group as that special. Now, if you think the group is special, if you want to be a part of that group, you're going to be a lot more likely to conform. If you don't see the group as that special or providing any influence for you, if you don't think you'll get anything from them, if you don't really care, you're going to be less likely to conform as a result. So I think we're going to have some fun here. So that's really all I have for conformity. I had grand plans to do a recording of the whole book this semester, and I kind of found it was hard to keep up with as the semester went on. I will probably be recording the rest of the book over the break, but I think you are going to enjoy this section. So basically, in between conformity and obedience is compliance. And compliance is kind of getting bad rap right now. And I think people mistake compliance for obedience. So, for example, there are some people in my family who are like, you're just really quick to be compliant. I'm like, yeah, I wear a mask. I'm required to run my place of business, and I don't like getting sick, and I don't like getting other people sick. But that's not the same thing as obedience. Compliance is doing what somebody asks you to. And here's what's really critical. It's not what you would consider an authority figure. So when we wear masks on campus because we're told to, that is technically obedience. When we do it in our everyday lives when we're not required to, that's compliance. Now, here's what's really interesting. The way that you ask somebody to do something for you really matters. So imagine that you need to ask me for an extension, for an assignment, or for homework. So how do you think I would respond if you came up to me and said, Dr. Gilchrist, can I have an extension on our next quiz? How do you think I'd take that? You're like, I don't know, Dr. Gilchrist, how would you take it? Well, here's the thing that's kind of important. So you could ask me, Dr. Gilchrist, would you grant me an extension? But I'm probably going to want to know why. So here's my question. So it's kind of clear that giving me a reason for why you need this is important. But let's see if we can make a difference. Let's see if we can kind of think this through a little bit. So it's kind of clear that if you need an extension, I'm going to want to know why. So giving me a reason is good. So here are two potential reasons. Dr. Gilchrist, can you give me an extension on our quiz? I had a paper that was due yesterday and I haven't really had time to catch up with the reading. Okay, so it's a relevant reason. It is a reason that is relevant to why you need more time. Here's a different one. Dr. Gilchrist, can you give me an extension on the quiz? I'm having a really hard time lately, and I'm really sad, and also trying to think. Also, I ran out of ice cream in my dorm. So we've got one reason that's relevant to why you need an extension. We've got another reason that's not as relevant. So feeling bad doesn't necessarily tell me why you need this extension. And running out of ice cream clearly doesn't tell me why you need an extension. So here's what research has found. As long as you give a reason, even if it's not relevant, your request is more likely to be granted. So this is based off of work by a researcher who's probably one of the best known people on compliance. His name is Robert Cialdini. He's done a lot of work on persuasion. And there is his name. He's done a lot of work on persuasion and compliance. And so this is a study that he did where people were basically going up to participants and going, may I use your Xerox machine? For those who don't know, Xerox is basically a copy machine. May I use your copier? And here on our y-axis, we have the percentage of people that complied. So here you can kind of see that when no reason is given, most people are pretty compliant. Here we have a reason machine. The one in our building is broken, so it's a relevant reason. And you can see that compliance is about 90%. Here's what blows my mind, and maybe it blows yours too. If the reason is irrelevant, you still get a similar rate of compliance. So an example would be, can I borrow your Xerox machine? There are holes in my shoes. That has nothing to do with why you need the Xerox machine, but ultimately it doesn't matter. If you give a reason, even if it's not a relevant reason, people are more likely to grant your request. So, by the way, y'all, because I am teaching you about this, don't try any of these tricks on me. Don't play a player. Don't do it. Having said that, though, if there is something that you need from somebody, it is better to give them a reason for why you need it than to give them no reason at all. Odds are pretty good if you give a reason, even if it's not a relevant one, the request will be more likely to be granted. All right. So let me get rid of this little annotation. Get back here. Okay. So let's talk about a few other techniques. So another way that we can actually get compliance from people and actually get greater compliance is starting with an unreasonable request. This is what, so y'all remember last week we talked about the foot in the door phenomenon? We basically get greater compliance by asking people a very small request and then basically increasing the level of commitment. So people who put a sticker on their window are going to be more likely to agree to put an ugly, gigantic sign in their yard. That idea. We can do something a little bit different here. This is what's referred to as the door in the face technique. So the idea here is that you start out with a request that nobody in their mind would say yes to. Basically slamming the door in your face. But then you follow up with your real request. And all of a sudden, the real request sounds so much more reasonable that people are more likely to do it. So this is another Cialdini study that looked at this. So the real request was to take a group of juvenile delinquents to the zoo for a couple of hours. So interestingly enough, when you ask people to do that, maybe about only 15% say yes. However, if you start with the initial, a large initial request that nobody in their right mind would say yes to, in this case, would you take a group of would you work with a group of juvenile delinquents every day for 2 hours for the next month? That's a lot of work. That's a big commitment. Nobody's going to say yes to that. But if you get that no, and then you go, well, since that seems to be too much, how about just for 2 hours at the zoo tomorrow? All of a sudden, that real request that you want is so much more reasonable that you get a considerably higher rate of people agreeing, 50% in fact. So notice this difference. So again, if you want to ask your instructor a favor, start with something that they're going to say no to. Be very careful if you choose to do this. So that would be like asking me, Dr. Gilchrist, can I have an extension on all of the rest of the quizzes and our final exam? You know I'm going to say no to that. But then you go, well, what about just this one quiz? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's fine. All of a sudden, the real request sounds so much more sensible that people will just have to say yes. But wait, there's more. This is from Epic Rap Battles of History, Billy Mays versus Benjamin Franklin. How many of you remember Billy Mays? He always did infomercials and he'd always say, but wait, there's more. How many of you have done this? And I kind of talked about this previously when we talked about framing. How many of you like to shop at Kohl's? How many of you are going to be taking advantage of some Black Friday sales? Yeah, I know I did. I bought an iPad a couple of weeks ago that was marked down from its original value. And this is like a brand new 8th generation iPad. Everybody loves sales. And I'd like to remind you, you are not actually saving money when you buy things on sale. You are still spending money. You're just spending a little less, but you're not actually saving anything. So the reason that sales work is referred to as the that's not all technique. You begin with an inflated request, and then you offer a discount or a sale or a bonus. That's how Kohl's get you. That's how they get you. They will say, well, the original, they'll usually have something MRSP, market retail suggested price, on the tag. You're never going to be paying the market retail suggested price. You are never going to be paying that because they're always going to mark it down. It's why I kind of think that that MRSP is fake, because they never actually sell it at full price ever. So the idea is, because they put that on there and they put it on sale, you can directly compare the sale price to the suggested price, and you're like, oh, what a great deal. I need to buy this. Or, for example, when you buy something, so for example, I bought Animal Crossing, like the actual game from Target over the summer. It came with a free Tom Nook journal. And I'm like, ooh, that makes it a better deal. So by throwing in extra stuff that you get with your purchase, it makes you feel like you're getting a really good deal. So it reduces the initial high value, and it actually makes you more likely to buy it. So for example, here we have cupcakes. So this is a bake sale for cupcakes, and we're looking at the number of purchases. Now, depending on the situation, you are either told that they are 75 cents or they have been reduced to 75 cents. So the cupcake price is the same, 75 cents. But people are far more likely to buy the ones that have been reduced to 75 cents, because You realize that if it's been reduced, it must have been a higher price. Higher price means higher value. I'm getting a really good deal on these 75-cent cupcakes. They're cupcakes, y'all. I mean, I don't care if they're 75 cents. I'll still eat them. So keep that in mind. Late night infomercials, by the way, are very good at this. So they're like, buy this. That's not all. We'll also throw in a miniature hairdryer at a $99 value for just $25.99. You know, I've got a really good voice for this. I think I know a backup career. If this professor thing ends up not working out, I could do voiceovers for late night infomercials, and it would be amazing. So think about that the next time you buy like a Snuggie or a Chia Pet or those other as seen on TV things. Having said that though, I have occasionally found those as seen on TV things to occasionally be really good. We got a flipjack pan. You make pancakes and you just flip it over. So it's like a pan on each side so it cooks the pancake evenly. Those are actually pretty good. I will say that. I also like pancakes. Okay, so one other thing that we can do is something called lowballing. So here's an example. We kind of got lowballed this semester. When y'all signed up for this course over the summer, the time was set at 10. And then they pushed it back to 9:45, and I didn't see anybody going, that's 15 minutes too early. I'm dropping out. I'm leaving. I'm not taking this class. 15 minutes is like my point. Everybody who stayed, everybody signed on for the class, and most of you signed on for it when it was at 10 a.m. Nobody really changed their mind once the time changed a little bit, and that's because you already kind of committed to taking the class. So this is what is occasionally referred to as lowballing. I first secure your agreement. You tell me that we will do something, that you will do something for me, and then I increase it with hidden costs. So for example, let's say that you sign up for a psychology study with me, and I go, hey, will you sign up for a psychology study? And by the way, it's going to be at like 7 o'clock in the morning. How many of you would do it? I got no hands over here. How many of you would want to be in a psych lab at 7 o'clock in the morning? I have a feeling very, very few of you would. Now, however, here's how lowballing works. I go, would you be, oh, let's see what we got. Okay, yeah, lightness, I think that's true for everybody. Nobody wants to come in at 7 a.m., not even Dr. Gilchrist. But let's say I did this on the other hand. So this is what lowballing is. I go, hey, I'm doing a psychology study. Would you like to take part in it? And you go, yeah, I would. I'm like, I will get back to you regarding the time. And then I go, hey, listen, bad luck. Turns out the only time that's going to work for everybody is 7 o'clock in the morning. Can you make it? So here's the difference. I already secured your yes. You're not going to back out now. Now, some of you are like, that shows what you know, Dr. Gilchrist. I will absolutely back out. But what the research tends to show is that if I get that initial yes, you're going to be less likely to back out. So here's what Cialdini found. So if they were told 7 a.m. first, 30% of people volunteer. I'd like to meet those people. I am not one of those people. But additionally, for the group that got lowballed, they were like, yeah, I'll participate. And then they were later told it was at 7 a.m. More of them continued to volunteer. Now, it's kind of clear that some people probably backed out. But once I secure that commitment to you, remember, we want to be seen as people with integrity. We don't want to go back on our word. You know, most of us do have a sense of honor, of integrity. And so because of that, that's how lowballing works. Once I secure your agreement, you're not going to back out of it now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here. I am going to record this for you, and it will be available on Monday. We are going to finish up social psychology by talking about Milgram's famous obedience study. We will talk about relationships, and then we're going to move on to a section that I know that many of you have been waiting for. We will finish the semester by talking about psychological disorders. So you'll get a couple of lectures from me. Check your email next Monday, because that's where all of the information is going to be. And just to warn you, I'm going to be emailing you on Mondays. I'm going to be emailing you on Friday. So check your email. Have a wonderful break. I'm so proud of you. Let's keep going and finish this semester strong. I wish you safe travels and good health for you and your family. And have a wonderful semester. And I can't wait to see you in the spring.